Hello, I'm Betty Swan. Welcome to our show, Wisdom in the Night, where you get help for the tough decisions in your life. Tonight, I have a great guest. He is the pastor for the church here called Every Nation, New York City. Welcome, Bruce Ho.
Pleasure to be here.
Tell me about your church. What does it mean, Every Nation?
Well, Every Nation, New York City just means that we have people and really open from whatever walk of life, whatever nation you come from, you're welcome there. So we've got folks from all throughout Asia, Japanese, Chinese, Koreans, Vietnamese, Thai, we've got people from all over Europe, Eastern Europeans, Western Europeans. We've got people from India and Pakistan, Hispanics from both from Spain, but also from the Caribbean. Just people from all over the world. It's such a great mix of people.
Well, now how do they get along? Do they get
Great.
along well?
Yeah, it's great. It's just a reflection really of what God's kingdom. God's always said that his heart is for people from every nation. And so we just feel like the church should reflect that.
Bruce, you know it says in the Bible, in Revelation, before the throne of God, I saw people, thousands and thousands of people from every tribe and every nation in the world. So when people say, what about the heathen that have never heard about God? God has people, it says that, before the throne, worshiping Jesus from every nation, every tribe. So they're going to be there. So this is a reflection. This church that you are a pastor of is a reflection of that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so great.
Now
Love being a part of that.
Are you, what nationality, Chinese?
I'm Chinese.
All
I'm a
right.
fourth generation Chinese. My great-grandparents emigrated from China to Hawaii. And so that's where I grew up.
Now,
in
why
Hawaii.
did they go to Hawaii?
Most of them went as like farmhands and laborers looking to make a better life. Around the turn of the centuries when most of them emigrated there. Yeah.
And so you grew up in Hawaii?
I grew up there. Yeah, that's my childhood day. I actually was born there when I was 11 years old. We moved out to Guam. And so spent 6 or 7 years, my junior high and high school years in Guam, which is an even smaller island out in the Southeast Pacific. But then moved back to Hawaii for college.
Well, there's probably a lot of people that go, Mom and Dad, I just know God's called me to the University of Hawaii, right?
Well, it was the opposite for us. My dad said, you know what, you go to Hawaii, I'll pay for all your college. You want to go anywhere else, you're on your own.
Yeah.
We all decided to go to the University of Hawaii.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how that happened.
Yeah,
but
so what does all mean? Do you have a lot of kids in your family?
Well, there are 6 of us kids. I've got, there's 5 boys and 1 girl in my family. So,
The poor girl.
She's
She
the
grew up
rose,
with all those
rose
boys.
amongst the thorns, yes.
Yeah.
She grew up tough.
Yeah, I bet she did. She had to in order to survive, didn't she?
Yeah, but she is our favorite sister.
Now, when you grew up in Hawaii, did you work growing up? Did you learn how to work? What did you do with your life?
Being a good Chinese family, my parents are always big on education, things like that. Although I must say when my mom really renewed her walk with Christ, I was about 7 years old. And when she got saved, it was just radical. So we would, from then on, her goal was for all of us to be preachers and grew up in church. We were in church probably 7 days a week on most weeks. We did our homework in church, every night. It was under the pew. We were doing our homework and eating our dinner. So now wait
a minute here. You didn't grow up as a kid saying, I got sick of church and I didn't like church. It sounds like for you, it was just your life and you loved it.
Well, there are certainly moments when we were tired of church, I got to tell you. Yeah, as a kid, I can remember even sometimes my mom would take us into the living room and we would practice church. She said, y'all sit there and you got to learn how to sit, because you guys make too much noise in church.
That's all those boys.
It was all the boys, yeah. But it certainly did leave a foundation in my life of just knowing Christ, walking with Christ.
And what kind of a church did you go to? Was it a denominational or non-denominational?
Yeah, I got saved in a church that from what they called the Latter Rain movement, which was a church in what we call in revival, a small little church. I grew up in kind of a upper middle class neighborhood with nice church and nice community, but where my mom, what happened was in our neighborhood, there were a group of women who were meeting for a Bible study, and they invited her there one day. And she started going, because they offered to babysit the kids if she would go to the Bible study. So with 6 kids, she was happy for any babysitter.
Anything, just to get out of the house.
That's right, yeah. So she started going, and she realized, wow, these are people who really believe God is alive. And they started to she started to see the power of God demonstrated, things like miracles. And so she started to visit the church, which was in the worst part of town in Honolulu, where they had the original housing developments. It was the bad part of town. And so we started going to church there. And of course, our relatives were just, what are you doing? Why are you going to this small church in this bad part of town? But God was moving in that church. And so we would see miracles. God would show up dreams and visions.
See people healed?
People healed of all kinds of sicknesses. People with who would have decay in their teeth, and God would put gold fillings in there.
Really happened?
Yes, yeah. Small little church there. I think when we started going, it was maybe 40 or 50 people, but it started to explode into the hundreds of people starting to come out of all walks of life. That was back in the 60s, so a lot of hippies coming in, guys.
People are always looking for the real thing.
They are.
Because they've seen the other.
Yeah.
And they don't like it.
Yeah.
And then when they see the real thing, they say, this is different.
Yeah.
Even though it's challenging, has its challenges to take part in it, right?
Yeah.
Because you're saying where it was located.
Yeah. Worst part of town, small little church, and just a mishmash of people from all walks of life.
But it's kind of getting you ready for every nation, New York City.
Absolutely. That's the kingdom of God. When God starts moving, everybody gets touched.
So was your dad a part of it?
Yeah, it's interesting because he jumped in right from the start and really dove into God, was pursuing God. And then his business got busier and busier and busier. He had a consulting business that just got larger and larger. And that gradually pulled him away from church to where he was working 7 days a week and totally backslid from church. Yeah.
It can happen. Success can do that to you.
Sure thing,
Or
yeah.
busyness can do that to you.
Yeah.
And you don't even realize it until all of a sudden it's just not a part of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you grew up, you went to college. What kind of a career did you have, and how did that lead you into being a pastor?
Well, I went to college and studied zoology, and I thought I'd do the good Chinese thing of get a solid job with, good pay. And we looked at, either being a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, something with a good paycheck. But then as I got to the end of college, I started getting more and more involved in ministry, and decided, my brother got into medical school my last year of college, and I decided, that's not for me. I started hanging out with him at the hospital, and it just no longer felt like that's what I wanted to do with my life. So I decided just to graduate from college and then figure out from there. But in that intervening year, God started to move on my heart just to really try a bunch of different things. And so I decided 5 different things coming out of college. I wanted to go to Bible college, seminary, missions, work as a pastor, and do some business. And I thought I want to do each of those from 1 to 5 years and just see what each of those fields is like. And then after that, I'll be able to decide what I want to do the rest of my life. Because really what God worked in my life during that time was that my life calling as a mission was really to develop other people's lives and to pour myself into others who would have influence beyond themselves. And so I wanted to just get a good background in a lot of different things. And so that's why God laid those 5 things on my heart.
So you allotted 5 years for each one, did you say?
1 to 5 years.
1 to 5 years.
That was the goal. Actually, 1 or 2 years was what I expected to do in each one.
What'd you end up doing?
And so then I got out of college, and the first thing I did was I did Bible college. I worked for my dad for a year, and then I went to Bible college. After Bible college, I just did a year of Bible college. I went to a school where they said, I asked them if I could take just 4 classes from all 4 years and just get a feel for what Bible college had to offer. And they said, fine, you can do that. You take senior classes, junior classes.
Wow.
We'll give you 1 year
That's unique. That's different.
Yeah, they said 1 year of our best classes. So that was great. Got out of that, and then I was actually thinking I would go into business at that point. And my dad said, no, you've had all this learning. You don't, a lot of knowledge without any application will just make you proud and irrelevant. So he said, you should go be a missionary and use your knowledge. So I called up a missionary friend I knew and went to be a missionary in Hong Kong. for 2 years.
Now, do
Did
you
that.
speak Chinese?
I don't. Not at all. So that was exciting. Everybody would talk to me in Chinese. I felt like a fool for Christ many times, as I didn't know the language at all. But it was great learning. So I did that for 2 years. Came back and then did business. That's where I went to Amarillo, lived there.
Amarillo, Texas.
Amarillo, Texas.
Woo-hoo!
That's right.
So what'd you do after being a missionary since you're on this great quest?
Well, I came back home and told my family. I said, I want to go into business. I think now's the time. And my brother said, well, I'm starting a business in Texas, Amarillo, Texas, of all places.
Okay, yay, Texas. Okay.
Yay, Texas. And so I went to Texas. And
So can you speak Texan?
I reckon I can if I'm pressed.
Okay, well, I'm fixing to ask you another question.
Y'all just ask away. So I moved to Texas, up to Amarillo, there in the Panhandle, and it was a peanut business, working with a bunch of farmers, selling peanuts.
Oh, by yourself? Or did your brothers go into business with you? Or
It was my brother's business,
okay.
But
Okay.
I moved there,
Okay.
and he was going back and forth.
Okay.
I was the second employee of the company.
Okay.
They hired this one salesman, and I joined him as part of the sales force. And so learned a bunch about sales and peanut sales, learned a bunch about farming. It was...
I bet it was a culture shock.
It was. I loved it. It was so
Did you
different.
like Texans?
I love Texans.
Aren't they friendly?
They're friendly. It was just totally different. I love waking up at 2, 3 a.m. every morning and getting together to see the sunrise. They'd get together every morning and go
Go to the coffee shop and drink coffee?
eat donuts. We all came to the office and ate donuts and drank coffee, and because they wanted to come before the sun came up so they could go back to their farms.
Yeah, right.
And talk about the day and
That's a typical Texas thing.
it was great. Yeah.
Okay, so how long did you do that?
I did that just for a year. We started the business. The business really grew. We were selling to, I think we ended up selling to 37 states. We had our first $1 million of sales month in about 9 months into it. And
Wow.
then the co-op, whose peanuts we were selling, went bankrupt.
Oh my goodness.
They were. It's a long story, but they were committing some fraud with the peanuts that they were selling overseas to Europe, because they were selling some local and some overseas. And so my brother discovered the fraud and went to the FBI. and so that shut everything down. So I learned about startup business. I learned about shutdown business. It was
And you
educational.
learned about integrity
Learned about integrity.
because
Yeah.
you saw your brother do it.
Absolutely.
That's very difficult to be a whistleblower.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what kind of wisdom would you give somebody that's watching this show about being a whistleblower?
Well, I think if you conduct yourself with integrity all the time, I was the one on the ground working there. And so it's interesting because my brother blew the whistle on them, and just, again, there's that part of integrity and always being honest. I think for myself, it would have been easy for me for them to just throw me in with my brother, because obviously that's who I stood with. But interesting thing was that because I'd always worked well and always did my best and was always above board with them, even when they split from my brother, they still wanted me to work with them. Because
you were a good worker. A good worker is so hard to find.
That's right. If you work with integrity,
Yes,
and you're always
yes.
above board with them.
Yeah. All right. So that ended after a year. Then what'd you do?
Then
In this little quest. I'm very interested in this quest.
Yes, yeah. I came back home, and during that time, my father had gotten sick, so I continued to do family business at home. We had to take care of my dad. He needed 24/7 care, and so I moved in with my mom, helped take care of my dad, and worked family business from at home, mostly import-export, things like that. And then my dad passed away about a year later. So it was great because I got to spend that last year with my dad at home. And then from there, I went into ministry. So that was my entry.
Hawaii?
In Hawaii. The church I got saved in, that I grew up in, that I learned ministry in. They had actually throughout the years at different times asked me to come on ministry, and I just never felt it was God's timing. So did all these other things. And so at that point, I felt like now it's time. And so I went to them and say, hey, I would love to go into ministry. And they said, great, you can come on in.
Well, I can think of a piece of wisdom you could give people. There are people watching this show that get older and older and have never found what they really think they're supposed to be doing. They're good at a lot of things, but they can't find the thing. So you're saying by this search, and you really believe by trying what you did, it benefited you even though it took you a while to get to where you are now, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it was a great benefit because all of it was learning for the next stage. I think everything you do, if you do it with as unto the Lord, do it your best in everything you do, and learn the lessons in every stage and apply them to the next stage. In other words, don't waste any stage of your life, because every stage you can learn something. Everywhere you live, you can always learn something, and you can always be a contributor
To the next thing.
To the next thing. Well, you can also always be a contributor to the people that you are with at that time.
Oh, that's great.
So invest yourself fully wherever you are.
So you're saying that the wisdom that you give people is on this quest, be sure you're investing in the people in whatever you currently are doing, right?
That's right. You're not waiting for to finally come to your final stage. I think treat each stage as important, and give your best to each and every stage. Don't treat it as a waiting place for the next stage.
Well, I have a question. Did you ever feel like, am I really not a success because I can't seem to find the thing I'm going to stay with? Did you ever wonder about that?
I think you always can. That's always a choice. I think what you want to think about yourself is always a choice.
Okay, good.
So you can choose how you view yourself is really up to you. So, and then that again is an integrity question. To say, am I honestly before God, doing my best and doing what I think God would want me to do? If I am, then throw myself all into it. If I'm not, then I should be seeking God for what is it, Lord, that you want me to be doing. And so I can say this, that at every stage of my life, I always felt like I was doing what God wanted me to do. And then when I felt it wasn't the thing anymore, it was time to move to the next thing.
How'd you know when to move?
You know, it's a combination. Sometimes it's an inner gut sense, intuitive sense. And then that usually I always will talk to people who I consider to be wise and more mature than I. And then also sometimes it's circumstance. So for instance, when that company went bankrupt,
That obviously was time to move on.
Yeah, time to move on.
Right. And so through all of this, were you married? Did you have family you drug around with you? What?
No, through all of that, I was single.
Oh, really?
Yep, single till I was 50.
Oh, my gosh, are you serious?
I was the 50-year-old virgin. That's
a real virgin?
Real virgin. Yep, the real thing.
Well, boy, talk us about that. Tell us about that.
You know, I can honestly say I've never had a season in my life that I didn't enjoy. So I've never been one of those people who I have to get married. I never felt like I need to get married. I also was never one who felt like I have what they call the gift of celibacy, where I always knew I would get married, and always liked women. But I just had what we often call it a gift of singleness, that God gives you in that time to be able to enjoy your singleness. So I enjoyed all my single years, and now I'm loving my married years.
Yeah. How long have you been married?
5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of advice would you give someone who's watching this that has never married and he or she is 50?
Yeah.
What would you say?
I would say invest yourself into what you're currently doing. The first 50 years of my life, I was just so excited about the opportunities that I had, and really giving myself to the things that were there to do, rather than thinking about what wasn't there. So I didn't spend all my time thinking about the wife I didn't have. I always just invested myself into the relationships that I did have. And there's always relationships around to invest yourself into.
Well, I think at the first of this interview, you said that you really had determined that your main call in life or purpose was to invest in the lives of other people and help them become successful. Is that?
Yeah.
What did you see yourself doing that all along the way?
All along the way. I think
No matter what you were doing, you found yourself doing that.
There's a verse in the Bible, 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2, where Paul says to a young Timothy, he tells him that the things that I've taught you in the presence of other people, you now go and teach those to other people who will in turn pass them on to others. So what he's telling Timothy is invest your life into others who are willing to invest their lives into others.
In others.
Right. It's almost like be a leader of people who are going to be leaders.
So really kind of what you're saying is not just invest yourself in the lives of other people, but find the people that you think will also do it.
Right. Yes.
So how do you go about doing that?
Sometimes you don't know until you start. And as you go and as you share with them, you find out, are they taking what I've learned? Are they doing what we're talking about? Are the things that they say they'll do, do they go and do them?
Mm-hmm.
And
do you ever go down and talk to the people they're supposedly working with?
Sure.
And
yeah.
what do you ask them? What kind of questions?
I think you just watch their lives. You just see what's going on in their life. You see how they're addressing things, how they're growing, and if this person is having an influence in helping them grow. And if they're not, then at some point you just say, we'll always be friends, but I really have to invest my time into people who are going to really do something with what we're talking about.
That's a very diplomatic way of saying it. I mean, it's a good way. I'm not saying that because it doesn't burn any bridges. Mm-hmm. It just moves you on to what you're really supposed to be doing.
Right.
And then you can teach that to them too, right?
Absolutely. You just have one life to live.
Yeah.
So make the most of it.
So what's ahead for you? What are your dreams now?
That's a great question. I'm not sure that it changes. To me, the 2 Timothy 2:2, investing my life into people who invest their lives into others, that's a life mission, so it doesn't ever change. And I think that's a key thing because that's more of a calling and a life purpose as opposed to a job. So I never think of myself in terms of jobs or where I'm going to get my paycheck from. But I'll always be looking for places that I can influence people who will influence others. So for me, if tomorrow God said, now go into business, I'd say, great, I'll go do that. But in business, I would look for how can I invest my life into people who will then influence others.
All right. Well, then can you give an example of how that's going on right now? Doing what you're doing now, how are you finding people? And how's that working?
Well, as a pastor, it's really a great platform for that, which is probably why I've stayed as a pastor for so long, because there is the congregation or the church community that you work in, and there's a lot of ways of doing that. There's the people who help you run the church and do church. There are also men and women that look to you as a leader. Just the times you get to preach on a Sunday or teach a Bible study, that's a great moment for investing into people who can then influence others. We also have what we call small groups, connect groups, and these are small Bible studies where you really get to interact with people. That's another great way of investing your life, doing what the Bible calls discipleship, which is basically just taking what you've learned and passing it on to someone else. I also, in the church as a whole, we have multiple different congregations around the city. And amongst all the congregations, I work in the area of discipleship and leadership development. So that's a natural fit.
That's a natural output of what you have in your heart to do, right?
Yes.
They found a way for you to use.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great place. Yeah.
And do you work with all age groups, or you have certain age groups that you're more successful with?
I more work with the young adults and adults. We have a staff that focuses on students from college to high school to children. So my work is more with the adults. Yeah.
So if you were going to take one of these adults that you're seeing, now this one could do it, and they don't have a close relationship with the Lord yet, maybe a personal relationship, how would you help them get that?
That's a great question. I think you start by finding out a little bit about them. So you connect with them and build a relationship with them personally. But then you also keep an ear tuned to what we say, you tune into what God is telling you about them.
Oh, okay. How do you do that?
I think a lot of it is intuitive. It's subjective. There's a lot of ways that God speaks to you in subjective ways, either through the scripture. Sometimes I'll read a scripture that I feel like that's for them, or God will show me a principle in the scripture that I think really would help them. Sometimes you just see things in their life and you say, okay, God, now how can I help them with that? Other times you see where God could take them. Say, God, where do you see this person going? And then God speaks to you sometimes in impressions and thoughts. A lot of times God speaks to me in thoughts, ideas. I'll get an idea. I think this person would be good in this area.
Oh, really? And then do you talk to them about that along that angle?
Sure. Yeah.
And then how do you help them? How do they get what you've got?
How do they get what you've got? A lot of it's obviously conversation, but then it is you in conversation finding ways that where they can apply it in their life, because it's different for everybody's life. But the principles are always the same, whether it's like being a person of integrity, investing into others, being a generous person. The principles are the same, but how it works out in different people's lives always changes.
Okay, well, what have been like some challenges? I know you're bound to have had some. I mean, you've done so many things, but
Yeah.
what have been your greatest challenges?
I think it's always a challenge to find out what you feel like God would do in a situation. And God, how do you see this? What are you saying about me? So seeing yourself from God's perspective, seeing your circumstances from God's perspective, seeing other people from God's perspective. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, but to me also the biggest key to success in life. And because we all have our own opinions, and we're all swayed by the opinions of others. But sorting through our own opinions, our own feelings, our own emotions, our own thoughts about a person or about a circumstance, and trying to get to, God, how do you see this? And sometimes you remember a scriptural principle. Sometimes I'll remember what someone else has taught me. Sometimes it's an inner thought that I know that's from God. And so I think that to me is the biggest challenge, because even thinking about myself, it's easy for me to think about myself based on my own circumstances and think, well, I'm not this, I'm not that, this person, or think about what other people think about you and get stuck on that. But it's really, God, how do you see me?
Oh, that is really good. This has just been a great thing for you to hear tonight. And I know if you've listened carefully, what Bruce has been talking about will apply in your life, in your work. It doesn't have to be that you're in the ministry. Anything that you are doing, that you have people following you, and they're wanting to learn how you do things. They're wanting to learn how to help other people get what they've got. So this has been really great tonight. And I'm so glad you've tuned in. I just think it's great. Thank you for tuning in. It wasn't an accident that you turned on the TV tonight. And I hope you receive some wisdom and that you have a great rest of the night, whether you are going to sleep or you are going to work. I'll see you next time. Bye.